Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler and today we're going to talk about Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And this is not a review. This is really a flip through. I'm flipping through the book. I'm going to talk about my first impression. I know John has already done a really quick review or first impression himself, but I've actually had a little bit of time to have a look at the book and the content. And I have to say that Xanathar's Guide to Everything is probably going to be one of the big selling books for 2017. There are a lot of people who want this book. It is sold out in New Zealand. It is sold out in Australia. I realise some people have indicated to me that you can't get it off Amazon UK. You're waiting quite a long time. I don't know if you can get it from Amazon USA or North America. I have no idea. I know that lots of stores are running out of this product. It's going off the shelves super fast. And the price is just under $30 on Amazon, but I have heard of people hiking the price up on this book, probably because of the strong demand. They changed the pricing, which they probably shouldn't, because there is a listed price on the back, and you're supposed to sort of work within those parameters, but like anything, if demand increases, then people selling the product will increase the price. I'm going to say right now, this is quite a thin book. This is also designed to be a player's handbook and a Dungeon Master reference tool. It's supposed to fulfill two purposes, and Wizards of the Coast has been doing this with quite a few of their products recently, and I totally understand them doing that. It means they get more sales and they don't wind up with a product coming onto the market that only sells to one particular part of their market. I understand that. That's fine. The artwork, this is not the special edition. This is just the standard version. I actually like this cover more myself, but if you like the other version, I believe I'm going to be doing a review at some point with John, and he will cover it, and he has the special edition Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So we're going to open it up and we're going to start flipping through, and I will talk as we go. As usual, we get pretty good artwork. I like the artwork that we're getting from Dungeons & Dragons 5e. I always thought it was impressive in the player's handbook, and it continues to be impressive. Now, there is a disclaimer here, and I think a gazillion people have read out this disclaimer. It's not necessarily that funny. I think they've been getting worse over time. And it's basically about the goldfish. Okay, I'm not going to read it because I can barely see it. I'm reading it upside down. The book is broken up into a contents page, and we get your introduction, your character options, which is the really big selling point for this book. And there's lots of character options. I believe it goes right up to a page about 73 or something like that. And then you get your Dungeon Master tools, which is chapter 2. And then your spells, which is covered in chapter 3, and then your appendices, which is a collection of all sorts of things. I have some issues with the appendices, but I will discuss them as we get there. And it talks really briefly about the main characters, Sildar and Xanathar. Xanathar is the beholder, and Sildar is the goldfish. And it gives you a really quick sort of breakdown. Jeremy Crawford has obviously taken this opportunity to make sure he can cover some of the rules that people have not been using or ask him constantly about. And this particular page here is all about that. And he's actually listed a whole lot of rules that I've covered in videos before, such as exceptions superseding general rules, rounding down numbers, advantage and disadvantage and how to use it. Just a quick provisor to there. Combining different magical effects is covered. Reaction timing, resistances and vulnerability is also covered. Proficiency bonuses, bonus action spells and how they work. That's often confused for a lot of people, so he's covered that. And then concentration and temporary hit points. And there's one page essentially designated to just the things he constantly has to answer questions on. And we get full page art, which I like. It's always good. Then we get a breakdown of the different classes and the paths. Now, what we're talking about here is we're not getting a new class. What you're getting is a subclass, an archetype of some kind. And the barbarian has about 3, the bard has 3, the cleric gets 2, the druid gets 2, the fighter gets 3, the monk is getting 3, the paladin's getting 2, the ranger's getting 3, and right now, I'm going to tell you now, no, there's no Beastmaster. That revised Beastmaster for the ranger is not included in this book. The rogue is getting dished out quite a bit. There's 4 of them for this. The sorcerer, there's 3, and the warlock gets 2 and 1 for the wizard. And we'll just slip through this fairly quickly. There are different paths to each one of these. Now, all of the content you're seeing here, you have probably already seen. You've either seen it in Unearthed Arcana, and it's just the final template or the final printing of whatever it is that we're dealing with. Or you've seen it in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, or you've seen it in something like, what else? Some of the other books. I don't know which ones they are exactly, but I know this is mostly content that you have seen before. Honestly, I think the only reason for doing this is to make sure that the content is in one location, which I totally understand. If you are playing Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League, then you're going to want this content in one place because you only get to use one book. So I understand that. Now, just here, we're dealing with your beast shapes and the beasts that you can transform into. And on page 24 through to 25, and I believe also part of 26, you'll notice there's charts, and these are all the beasts that you can transform into using your beast shape for the druid, which I thought was a sensible thing. It's always coming up in games. What can I transform into? And really, in the rules, it's pretty clear, but they've spelled it out and made it nice and clear because you've literally given you charts for it all. The fighter is covered. I think when it comes to playing Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League, they can only use one source book, and I think a lot of the reason for producing this is so that, one, the Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League people can use one source book and draw from just this one book to do their character building. On top of that, I would say a lot of people don't want to have to try and find the PDF or look for anything regarding something out of the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. Not a very popular book, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. So not an awful lot of people want to buy that. It's expensive, it's quite small. Another reason, I suppose, why you wouldn't want to necessarily go and buy that particular book if you can buy this one. So it makes perfect sense to me. I understand all of this. What I don't understand is when it comes to the Ranger, we get, look, they have absolutely thrashed the advertising on this book. You can go onto YouTube on D&D Beyond, and there is a video on literally every class, or subclass, should I say, archetype whatsoever for any of the classes that they have put out in this book. They talk about them in detail. And this is just the mechanical side, really. They just didn't include the mechanical side in the actual videos. That was more the flavour side and how they worked and so forth. So they have absolutely thrashed it. I've never seen anything like it. It'd be the first time I've ever seen Wizards of the Coast try to advertise a book so hard. And it's been really successful. So is it worth buying? Well, if you don't want to have a whole lot of different resources split up all over the place and you want the final document, then this is obviously the book you want. In terms of will you buy it as a player, I think players will be reasonably happy, although there's a section for the Dungeon Master, so they might not be so happy about that section. But we're up to page 53, we're on the Warlock, moving through. There's lots of options here. I mean, some of it's flavour, some of it's just help to sort of build out the character and it's not mechanical, but there are plenty of mechanical aspects to all of these archetypes. I'm going to move past here, and as always, artwork's very nice. I think the wizard getting one archetype was kind of reasonable. The war mage, uh, there's so many options for a wizard already. Really, they didn't need anything more, and the war mage was the most obvious uh, fill-in. It's the only thing that was really missing. So they have done that, which is good. Psionics. If you were thinking there was going to be psionics, no. Unfortunately, no psionics. A lot of not everything that's been in through Unearthed Arcana has made it into the book. So if you're expecting everything, it absolutely isn't got every element from Unearthed Arcana. And obviously they're still working on the Beastmaster for the Ranger. So now it starts talking about this is your life. This is the part of the book that I thought was probably one of the more interesting aspects for players, because it talks about how to create your background, creating your origin, sort of what sort of life you might have had before you started adventuring. And it breaks this down into races, so you've got options for races. It even gives you charts. There's lots and lots of charts determining where your birthplace was, what your family was like, or if you had a family, whether you've got absent parents, your family lifestyle, the number of siblings you have. I mean, really, they've literally just created charts for absolutely everything. And they've also included charts that build on the backgrounds. So there's charts here for the different backgrounds. Now, it doesn't cover all of them. So the Acolyte, the Charlatan, and there's more information that you didn't have before, which I thought was quite nice. Now, you could obviously roll a six-sided dice to determine what you want, or you could just pick something you want. But if you're smart enough, you probably won't need this section at all. You know, if you've got a good imagination, you won't need this section. It also breaks it down into the different classes. You literally get another table for each of the different classes to help build out your character and give it interesting sort of features. I think that's a nice part of the book. I actually thought that was a sensible thing to do. Life events. There's actually a huge chart for life events. Now, it's broken up into a percentile dice, but don't think that there's an option for every single number on the percentile. It's not like there's 100 different options for your lifestyle events. It's actually, that's how big it is. Okay? We'll flip on through. It continues on. It talks about there's charts for adventuring and the adventures you've been on in the past. Everything under the sun. Covers lots and lots of different stuff. So that was about page 63, I think, roughly, that you had the mechanical stuff. And then we started moving into the sort of more fluff, building your character out, the background stuff. We have feats. So there are feats. I would like to point out, though, that all of the feats in this book are racial feats. And there is only one for the human. So if you were expecting to get something that would include a whole lot of different feats, like in the player's handbook, that gave you huge options, it's not the case, because they require you to be a particular race. Something like Dragon Hide, Dragon Fear, Drow High Magic, Dwarven Fortitude, all these sorts of things are basically tied to a particular race. Not to a class, but to a race. I'm going to say it right now, if you were expecting to find new races in this particular book, you will not. That's it. Notice that that's 2 pages of feats. There is no more. Some more really, really nice artwork. I continue to be really pleased with the kind of work they are doing. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be everybody's style, but that doesn't matter. It can't suit everybody. Next, we're on page 77, and we're dealing with the Dungeon Master's tools. So this is the part that I was really interested in, because I would use this the most, for me. I probably won't use the front of the book. I would probably use this section. And this covers everything from falling, when you had questions about how fast you would fall, how long it's going to take. We already know how much damage you take when you fall, but that was really important. One of the things that was definitely missing from the player's handbook was information on sleeping. And they have included a little section on sleeping, waking somebody up, sleeping in armor, which has always been something that's been a lot of arguments about. What they do start to reference though is the long rest, and the long rest doesn't mean you necessarily sleep. So I think there's going to be a bit of confusion in this section on sleeping when people start talking about the long rest. And I don't want to go into a huge amount of detail because I think that requires a whole video to actually cover that. Going without a long rest is discussed as well. How to actually make adamantium weapons. Tying knots. I'm not sure that you necessarily needed to have information on tying knots, but apparently they have included that as well. Different tool proficiencies. Now this is where I thought it was very, very smart. They have included tool proficiencies and detailed information on how to actually utilize them and the kinds of DCs. So there's examples of DCs for using a brewer's supplies or brewer's kit, or using the alchemist's kit or their supplies, using those skills. Now that was smart, and it's at the top. The DC is at the top, and the breakdown and information that you want to know, which sort of helps you tie it all together and make it more sense, which skill I'm going to be using for this particular feature, and tool proficiency, they're listed below. So that's awesome. And there's pages of this, absolutely pages and pages. Carpenter's tools, cobbler's tools, cooking utensils. I don't know that I needed to know anything about cooking utensils, but okay. The disguise kit, that's very important. How many times has somebody wanted to disguise themselves and you needed to have an idea of how to forge a document, or what is the DC for actually disguising yourself as a town guard, or whatever it might be. A forgery kit, there's information on that. I'm going to keep rattling through because I don't need to talk about every single one of them. Literally every tool there is, there's information on how to use it. And then we get into spell casting. So a lot of the problem with playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e is we weren't too sure how to determine how does a player get their character to perceive if a caster is at work trying to cast a spell, and what type of spell they might be casting. Well, we now have a couple of paragraphs explaining how that works. How to identify the spell is included, and that's another 3 paragraphs or so. Yeah, I thought that was very, very clever. This is the part that got me really excited, because if you play with a grid, trying to determine the area effect can be a little bit difficult just using the player's handbook. And they have given you detailed information on how to use templates, how to use the token method, and they've just used dice basically to represent area. And this is to give you an idea of where your cone is going to be laid down, where a sphere is laid down. Things like cubes and lines are very easy, but it's always the cone and the sphere that cause the most problems. Or the cylinder. The cylinder can be a bit of a problem too. And I don't think they've covered that quite as much, but I think there are ways of dealing with that. Now, I don't know why they've included this, because I feel like the encounter building rules are rubbish anyway, but they've tried to go into more detail about figuring out what your encounter should be like for the player's level. And it's a sensible thing to do. It does go into the fact that it's less of a mathematical equation and more of an art. So, but they have provided you with a little bit of guidance around that. I still feel like it's information that probably wouldn't get people much further than they already have. Okay, so next we have a breakdown of charts on multiple monsters and character levels. I'm not going to go through this part too much. I really feel like building encounters is just a great, huge piece of BS, really. Okay, random encounters. I thought this was really smart on their part. Random encounters are one of those things that we come up all the time. They're always in their printed adventures, and I use them quite a lot. And they have actually provided you with a little bit of information about creating random encounters. And what they've done is they've taken the monster manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide, and they've combined those, and they've given you by tier or character level, the ranges are like level 1 to 4, levels 5 to 10, levels 11 to 16, and levels 17 to 20. And they're giving you charts. So based on the area that you're in, you get a rough idea of what sort of random encounters you might get in that location, where it be Arctic locations or coastal regions or stuff like that. And they've given you a range of easy, medium, hard, very hard, and deadly encounters. So it's a mixed bag. Now, you don't have to turn these into combat encounters. They do stipulate that. And they could be social encounters, or they could be a skill check of some kind, or a skill challenge, or something else if you can think of it. What I don't like about it is that I feel like for a new Dungeon Master, the random encounter section is probably going to be useful. For an experienced Dungeon Master, this section is probably not very useful. And the only parts in this section, and as you see I'm flipping through, there's a lot of it. The only parts I really found interesting were the ones that didn't stipulate a particular type of creature or monster. They actually give you something that's like something to investigate or explore, or an oddity, something that's truly a random and unusual encounter. And I think those are the best selling points of any kind of random encounter, is these sorts of sections here, where they detail something that is not in bold, and it's usually like a sentence or two, and it describes something really unusual. I thought that was the best element, and yet there's not that much of it. Most of it is in bold, and it's either set up to be a social encounter, but probably going to wind up being a combat encounter. And we continue on, and it goes on. Look, they've covered every single location you can imagine, right through. We've got urban, we've got underdark. Okay, now there was a section in Unearthed Arcana that talked about traps, and here they have provided you an idea of how to create sample traps. They've provided you with sample traps, and they've explained how to create simple and complex traps. Now, I thought this was a good idea. If you like using traps, they now have included the crossbow trap, which I could have sworn might have already been in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I could be wrong. We've got the falling portcullis, which is quite common, the fiery blast, net traps, pit traps, poison needle, which I still feel is in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I'm pretty sure the poison needle is. And we also have the scything blades. I think there's a murder boulder here too, some sort of boulder that falls down. It might be a bit further on. And Sleep of Ages. So it explains how to put them together. DCs are provided. So yeah. And then of course you get complex traps, and they give you an example and explain how to do it. So if you like traps, I think this is actually, they've donated quite a lot of the book to this section. There's pages and pages of it. Now here's a really nice section, and that is downtime. Downtime revisited. We have, how many times have your players said, look, I want to do something in downtime, can I do this? And there was a fantastic section in the Unearthed Arcana that talked about creating rivals for your players. Very, very smart. And it covers all the things you might want to do. Carousing, creating stuff. It's all there. Making magic items, yes. We have to worry about creating magic items at some point. And not everybody's going to use creating magic items anyway. But it is covered here in a lot more detail. There wasn't a lot of information in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and now you do actually have some decent information to actually build it on, which is a good idea. I thought it was fantastic. Gambling, if you want to gamble, getting involved in pit fighting. So all the sorts of things that players like to do. Researching, creating scrolls. I couldn't find a section on brewing potions, but I think that might be in tool proficiencies, which we passed. I'm pretty sure it might be there. So scrolls, creating them. If you are wondering, is there a section on a business? running a business. No, I didn't see anything on running a business, but I did see a section on holding down a job or working. Work complications, this is all covered here, training, that sort of stuff, but work complications, that sort of stuff is actually in this section. They explain how to award magic items, which I think, to be fair, most dungeon masters will figure out. I think this is going to be more useful to a new dungeon master, and then they will probably adjust what they're doing based on how things work out for them. And then you get a whole lot of magic items. Now these magic items they're mostly common, and they're quite quirky, but they're not super powerful. They're actually more fun and entertaining than anything else. And I'm not going to go through all of them or even talk too much about them, because I still think they are an awesome idea. And there's a couple of pages of this, so yep, not bad. And you get charts, so you can actually generate, is this a scroll, armor, breaking it down into wondrous items so you can find them fairly quickly. So I'll get past the charts section because I don't feel like that actually adds very much to the actual book itself. And we get on to spells. Now the spells start on page 147, and these are mostly from the Elemental Evil Companion Guide. I think that's the book that they've taken most of it from. I'm pretty sure that the few cantrips you could find in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide are also included in here. And there's pages of them. Absolutely pages. Not every single class gets equal treatment with the spells, though. What they have at least done is they've corrected some of the errors in the spell sections that needed errata from previous versions of documents or their books. So that's good, which they should have done anyway, really. And this goes on and on. I'm not going to go into all the different things that are available. The one spell I'm just going to call out right now is Power Word Pain. Catapult, I would imagine, will be very popular too. I remember a lot of people liking that. Lots of storm-like elemental spells are in here. You can summon demons, yes. You can summon a greater demon if you want to. And we'll just keep trucking along here. Lots and lots of different spells. Okay, now we're on to the appendices. Now, the appendices here is basically it talks about sharing your campaigns. And this is just basically a very general breakdown of stuff. How to deal with code of conduct, some guidance around the code of conduct at your table. I was surprised to see this in the book. How often do you see it in a book? You don't really. Usually we wind up on the internet trying to find information like this. Starting equipment, ability scores, all that sort of stuff is covered very, very briefly. I don't know that it necessarily adds very much to the book, unfortunately. And then we go into character names. Now, this is on page 175. I want you to pay close attention. I'm on page 175, and this is just charts and charts of names that you randomly roll on a percentile dice for different races, whether they be male or female. And look, there's nothing wrong with these names. What I have an issue with is there's so many pages. Look at how many pages. It keeps going on and on. I'm still going. I'm on page 184, and there are still names. More names. It doesn't stop. And now we're here. This is the end of the book. On page 192, we stop. There's no more. There's no index. Yet again, no index. I feel like that Wizards of the Coast is dropping the ball when it comes to creating a book by not including indexes. Their contents page are all right, but they don't tell you everything you need to know. You do need to have an index in a book. It's always an important thing to have there. And these are always reference books. What reference book does not have an index? I just don't understand why they do this. So, what do I think of this book as my first impression? I want the book. Truthfully, I do want the book. Do I feel that the price is worth it for 192 pages, of which about 20 pages are random names? I'm not too happy about that. And there's quite a few pages of random encounters included. I'm not so happy about that fact either. Why do they do this? I don't understand why they do this sort of thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to do a book and make it, we've been waiting for a book like this for so long. Everybody's been hanging out for that book that had pretty much all the tools they wanted. And this thing, it's got some good stuff in it, but it's got some stuff that didn't need to be there. And I feel like that was the most frustrating element for this book. In any case, it won't matter. It's going to sell out. They're probably going to have to reprint it because there's so many people who want this book. You'll probably struggle to get a copy if you try to get in late on buying this book for Christmas. So yeah, that's my view. It's got good elements to it, but it's got some stuff that didn't need to be there. And for the size of the book, 192 pages, and the price you're paying, I feel like you're paying quite a lot, considering how expensive it is, and particularly since a lot of people are trying to sell it at a hiked up price. So if you found this video helpful or informative, please share, like, and subscribe. Look, I'm going to stay around and answer a few questions after this if people want to. I don't have a problem with that. Please make a comment below if you have any questions about Xanathar's Guide to Everything. This is not my copy. I don't actually have a copy of Xanathar's Guide to Everything. This copy belongs to John Shackle. And if you want to buy it, I will put a link to Amazon. I'm an Amazon affiliate, and you can buy it from them. It doesn't cost you any more. I just get a commission. Costs you exactly the same, and it helps me out just a fraction. I get a small commission. Other than that, I'm just going to say, look, think really hard before you buy this, okay? And bear in mind, right now, you might be better off to wait till after Christmas when the rush is over before you pick it up. Until next time, keep rolling those 20s.